We live.
It was highly descriptive.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Sunderland Board of Selectmen. It's January 14th, 2013. I'd like to call the order at 7:04. One comment before we stop. We've been taping our meetings now for...
Just for, let the people know that there's some crackling and I'm working on it. I can get some crackling.
Tom's fixing the crackling.
I'm going down under.
He's done it.
Is that a technical term?
So if the video cuts out.
You know, careful, this isn't a cable TV show, you know.
This is true.
So Tom Zimnowski right now is under the council, working on the crackling. So, but the comments is that we've been on TV. I would think almost 12 years now, Tom.
Yeah, at least 12 years.
At least 12 years.
We started in 1999.
1999. So we've been on the TV for 13 years now. I think everybody, when they first come in, David's probably the newest member, so he'll probably speak better of it. There's a little moment of trepidation when the lights come on very brightly on the front seat here, because they do come on brightly.
It does get bright, yeah.
But I also think that it's important in that our residents, if they so choose, have an opportunity to follow what's going on in town, either live, which if you're watching right now, and or on tape delay, because it is. But we've seen a couple of local communities that have problems about having committees that don't want to be taped.
Yeah.
And they're afraid about what's going to be taken out of context, and or they're going to lose that freedom of dialogue. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm going to say that I don't think if you can't say it on TV in a meeting, you shouldn't say it at all in a meeting, because I think we're able to pretty much have normal conversations within bounds, civility being one, but more the language that's used and the comments that are made. And I just think that's just good business, good government, but that's good business. So if anybody has a concern about running for a position that's going to be taped, I would just tell them, after you've done it one or two times, you don't even notice that the camera's on.
What's on?
I can also say that some of the things that the camera operators say take you totally by surprise.
The man behind the board back there.
and it kind of make you sit back and chuckle once in a while. So I just don't think a problem. And now our moderator's here, so we can continue with tonight's meeting.
It certainly hasn't stopped any of us from talking, that's for sure.
And if anybody knows Scott Bergeron, they'll know that he is a severe introvert and never says a word. And,
it's amazing.
Right.
yeah, that's one that Janet doesn't tell
I've
us.
observed that all the board members are.
All right, first. All right, first. It's so funny. First up, we were going to be discussing the police budget this evening as we start our fiscal 14 budget preparation. Unfortunately, the chief is under the weather, so we're not going to be hearing. We're not going to be talking about the budget tonight. So first up is the minutes of January 7th.
Motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded on the minutes of January 7th. One of the things that I would like to talk about for a short time tonight is, and we missed talking about it the other night with all the other thing, is about the 4 options, because we heard option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. I don't think we ever explained what those 4 options were to our residents. So we're going to talk about it briefly so that everybody will know what we're talking about. And that's part of the meetings, the minutes. So that's why we're going to talk about it. So we have a motion made and seconded on acceptance of the January 7th minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Margaret, 3-0. Now, Margaret, can you take a second and discuss the 4 options?
Okay, these are the shared EMS options from the planning team and consultants' Phase 2 report. Option 1, I'm going to try to be very, very brief. Option 1 was to try to make improvements at the local level. In other words, I think, this was also a do nothing at a regional level approach. This was just try to make your call service better. Try to get more people to answer calls and things like that. The planning team said that this does not adequately address the serious issues in response, in current call response. So this is not recommended by the project team. Option 2 would be that one town would take over a paramedic intercept service and support each town's call force. So it's basically, it would retain the call forces in each town and add a paramedic to the mix. And that paramedic would be staffed somewhere in the 3 towns. It would be an employee of one of the towns, but it would respond to the calls that the call force in each town are responding to. Now that would make slight improvements in the quality of care, but it doesn't adequately address the challenges of the call system. You'd still have the problems in place with inadequate response. So the team does not recommend option 2. Option 3 would be that one town alone would take over as a primary paramedic level EMS service. In this scenario, one of the 3 towns would actually take charge of the entire EMS service, and the other towns would pay an assessment to that town. The paramedic level service would be run by that town. It would be financed through assessments, and it would improve the quality of care, but it puts a large financial risk on the sponsoring community, because the towns that are paying an assessment into the service are only paying a portion of the costs that are going to offset the total cost of running the paramedic service. So the project team did not recommend option 3. Option 4 is the option that the 3 boards of selectmen discussed on the 7th, and that is a fully integrated regional EMS service. It's a paramedic level EMS service. It would be integrated among the 3 towns. It would be overseen by a board of oversight that would have representation from each of the 3 towns. The 3 towns would pay equitable assessments to run the paramedic level service, and it would be a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week first response paramedic ambulance. The team recommended this partly because it's going to allow the towns to see more revenues from intercepts than it currently sees or would see with any of the other scenarios. And it would be a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week service, which would be far more responsive than the current call service. So the team recommended option 4. I hope
so-
that explains it.
So we discussed that. David or Scott, do you have any other questions about that?
Not about the options, Mr. Chair, no.
Okay, any questions?
The path forward is as we go, this is the exploration and presentation phase. We're looking at the implementation steps now. And I think that will afford each of the communities as stakeholders the real view of what this is going to be. Right now, we have a project essentially in hand, and now we need to see what the implementation of that project is. And that, I don't think, is going to change the outcome, I suspect, but I think the implementation is going to challenge some of our paradigms. That is, town boundaries, town assets, town versus a regional view.
Right.
This being our first one, our first real roll-up of multiple departments into one regional thing. So that paradigm
Would be different than our schools?
No, it would be actually if you took our schools and you rolled it back to the time they were regionalized. That discussion, I think, is what we're going to be talking along those lines.
Yeah. so
We
we've
live in
we-
it now, it's
we've done it-
analogous.
we've done it before.
We've done it before, absolutely,
We're going from me to we.
exactly. That's all, that's my only, it's not even an issue of concern, I think it's gonna be an interesting and very healthy dialogue.
Hmm?
But we haven't done something collectively, you think about it, in our time, what is it, 58, 57, Frontier rolled up?
First time
Been a little-
in recent history.
Started back in the early 50s.
Right, so it's been a little while
Hmm.
before something like this has come together. We've had MOUs, we've had, you
So
know.
we'd have to ask Bob.
Well, he was still in school. He didn't care where the bus went. It was still school, right, Bob? It didn't matter.
7? Jeez. I just moved into the area.
See?
So that's my only point, Mr. Chair. The dialogue is gonna be interesting.
I think it's interesting, because I think it's, when we were talking the other night, and unfortunately, it gets in the same thing that we talked about, that ended up in our first conversation, is about money.
Right.
And
Right.
while money is a discussion, it should, I don't believe it should be the overwhelming discussion
Right.
that we're having. It's one component of the total.
Right.
And you have,
It's,
I think you have to understand that there is a cost to the service, and you have to judge if that cost worthwhile.
Mhm.
Now, you know, it was funny, because I was talking to someone from town that happened to have a concern, and when they talked to a medical person, they said, well, need to get Dad to the hospital right away. Well, they didn't call the ambulance, they just took Dad to the hospital. Right?
Right.
Well, when Dad got to the hospital, he collapsed. Now, if he had so I started thinking, well, what would have happened if he'd called for the ambulance? Would the ambulance have gotten him there quicker, as it sets up now? Would the ambulance got him there quicker or longer than Mom taking Dad to the hospital?
Or have the ability to apply care if it came up.
Correct.
One of
So, and I guess that's the question. And it's funny, because Margaret had a comment from another local community that's talking to us now. They were kind of involved in the beginning, but kind of got out of it, because they thought they didn't have a problem until they really did a reassessment of their program and said, well, maybe we do have a problem that we didn't know about. And now they're looking at it, says, well, I guess we did have a problem, but they didn't have the things in place to identify the problem. So you have to ask yourself, you know, and so until you look, you know, we can think that we don't have a problem, but then you have to talk to the, you know, people that live and breathe it every day, and they'll tell you that there is a problem, and it's not with us, just with us, it's, that's all, there's a lot of surrounding communities.
all the rural
Just
pieces.
a point of information. When our current ambulance leaves the station today, does it have an EMT on board? Has two.
Yes,
the EMTs have to get there first, right?
Right.
Are two required, or can one?
You'd need a waiver to allow one and a first responder, because I know the town next door had that arrangement with the state.
that's what Deerfield does.
Yeah,
The only reason that I raised the question is that I ran into a situation where a person had heart or chest pains, and I opted to bring the person to the hospital. Called the emergency room, said we're on our way. And then when I got there, I asked the physicians whether or not that was the way to go. And they said, absolutely not. You call 911, because the ambulance is gonna show up, they have trained personnel, and they have the equipment on board that can assist somebody right away.
Yeah, I think like, you might have technically on
Um,
paper been able to get there faster, but that's the whole thing, is you can't provide any en route service at all.
yeah.
And
I
that's,
would say you'd have to talk to Bobby about that,
Mhm.
but I know we have defibrillators on the ambulance. But as it stands now, and Bobby, I don't wanna talk out of school, but our EMTs can't administer, right? They're not
There are certain
administrating,
things that only paramedics are able to do.
right,
They can administer care up to
Certain level.
EMT level,
right, and so I don't know
which is
what,
one of the reasons we end up with these intercepts. It's one of, there are several, but that's one of the
The
reasons.
advanced life
and
support.
that, and see, that's what
And
the
advanced
doctor,
life
the
support,
doctor's
exactly
probably
right.
saying.
Right.
As soon as you call in, that there's chest pains or the potential with a heart condition, they're dispatching, they're dispatching a intercept also. An intercept is for us either Northampton or Greenfield, or Northampton or Amherst, or a BHS ambulance that has a paramedic on board. But in a lot of times, people see at homes, they'll see the Sunderland ambulance there, and a lot of times the Sunderland ambulance will have somebody in the bus, and they'll start a transport, and maybe a mile or 100 yards down, you'll see the ambulance pulls over, and they're
Swap.
swapping them out. Because that's where the intercept is. So it's not that our ambulance or the people in it, but they're getting you closer to where you gotta go. So,
It's,
But
I know
for us
firsthand,
also-
it's scary when an ambulance can't make it. You know, my younger son, just very briefly, my younger son, we found out that he was allergic to bees. Well, when he was stung by a bee, and he was having a severe allergic reaction. We couldn't get an ambulance. An ambulance could not come to our house in time. I had to load him up. He was young at the time. I had to load him up in the car. By the time we got up to Franklin Medical Center, he collapsed. He collapsed, and it was, if he had been able to get in an ambulance, they could have been doing some sort of Benadryl or you know, a pump or something to reduce the reaction. It was very, very scary.
Yeah. And that's not something you find out until it actually happens.
That's right.
You know.
That's
so,
right. Yeah. It's not something that can wait,
Right.
you know.
Mr. Chair, if I could, as we go about this discussion about regional and response times, and we had a lot of data that came out of the exploratory committee. You know, in my mind, there's a lot to be cautious in that tone about either winners or losers or territory. You know, I think those elements of this conversation. This is a very practical issue, and it's easy to fall into winners and losers. You're going to lose an ambulance or two people, or that building is going to be a little less occupied, or. But the reality is,
We're talking about real estate here.
actually,
It's a life safety issue. We're all
you
human.
say that, Bob, and yet in
There will be.
some of our meetings, it's descended into simple budget numbers and spreadsheets. And that turns into a winners and losers discussions, ability to pay, who can pay, what formula do we use? This is not a winners and losers discussion, and it should never fall into that category, except we're humans, and that happens.
You need to focus on what the problem is and how
Exactly.
we want to solve it,
And then-
rather than the minutia of getting, right, exactly,
And
pulled down by
and
that.
to your point, David, or during one of our meetings, maybe like the last one, a territory isn't necessarily the four boundaries that represent the town of Sunderland any longer.
Right,
It's response time and population distribution.
right, it's
And
how
the-
far can you get within a reasonable amount
Exactly
of
right,
time.
resource response time, and that's the other piece I wrote down here, and I wanna just
Yeah.
What's the
revisit
next
those.
step in this process?
What's that?
What's the next step?
Well, right now, we assigned a group, town administrators and DM directors, to sit down and basically map out those steps to the next thing. Such as, and we all were submitted questions that we think need to be addressed. What's a transition? What does a transition look like? You know, how do you withdraw? Maybe it's not working for you, so withdraw.
How do you
withdraw.
enter into
How do
it?
you enter, how do you get out?
Yep.
The accounting, how is the accounting process? How
Especially
is
with
that?
regard to startup, yeah.
How is that gonna thing? There's a lot, cause right now, you know, it's, when we looked at the original, when we're looking at the original response times and all of that, when you actually look at the map, Sunderland's basically not losing anything with it being over at the Deerfield, or the South Deerfield Fire Station. The response time to get from there is basically the same to most places. And actually, there's some response times longer in Deerfield than it is Sunderland. most of Sunderland, matter of fact. It takes longer to get to some points at Deerfield from what was put up in front of us. So that's what's gonna be, but I think, you know, Scott, you said something that really hasn't been said at the meeting, because sometimes selectmen get way caught up into this, the numbers. Cause unfortunately, we probably know the budgets best of most people, and so we start looking at the numbers. And we really think about, and it kind of breaks down to winning and losing discussion. But it's really not a,
That's why I
right,
said
it's not a winning,
that's a
it's
trap.
not a winning or losing discussion. It's, are we willing to, are we, you know, in the community's gonna go to vote, and they can vote yes, and they can vote no, but when you go to the thing, are you willing to take that chance not to have that protection? But it goes across all the age groups. Some people say, well, the older people are gonna be more concerned about that. It is, unless you have a kid that's playing baseball or soccer,
Accidents.
or ride the
That's-
bike, or
Or an
ride the
allergic
horse.
reaction.
Right,
Or
well,
anything,
exactly, we're
yeah.
all subject to that. I mean, you can
Right.
statistically, you know, say, sure, some people may use it more, but there's still, you're right, there's a huge
unpredictable.
swath of, exactly, especially auto accidents.
Ottawa,
Those tend to actually be younger people more statistically, so.
right. So it transcends all of that stuff, so.
Right.
You know, it should be an interesting discussion, and I think, to me, when the 3 ambulance directors just decided, actually, there was actually 4 ambulance directors at the time, or actually 5 when it first started, when they came together, and they weren't afraid. And that's a key point, that sometimes maybe getting missed. The ambulance directors came, and if any, it was funny, because one town, they were talking about police chiefs, right? And they said, and he said, well, we talked to the selectmen, said, well, why don't you just, it makes sense to combine. And I says, well, then they're gonna lose control of our town.
Right.
Well,
Right.
not really, it's that position. And he says, well, then how can the guys in the department work their way up? And he says, well, maybe they not be the best person for the job. But, and that being said, the ambulance directors themselves, who, and when you look at parochial protectionalists, should be the most,
Right.
and they're the ones that came forward with a concern. That should tell something to everybody.
And they were hoping to have it all in place by this year's
Well,
town meeting, you know what I mean?
that's
So
another
they
piece.
wanted it done as much sooner than, you know,
What do you
Pretty
folks
else.
see as the timeline on this?
well, it seems like it's gonna be tough to get it done by this town meeting, just because of all of the footwork that has to be done. But I guess, but you don't wanna wait till the next one, because it's too long, so we'll probably figure like a special town meeting somewhere in between, what, autumn maybe?
Annual and the next annual?
Something like that?
The implementation report is due April 1st. The boards want that due April 1st, so that's the
Yeah.
first step.
And that's what, 3 weeks before our town meeting or so?
But it is a big step.
And for all of the best intentions and for all of the hard work, we may find something in there that could actually be a trip to getting it into this year's town meeting. That's why it made sense to take at least one break on this train, because the train's already left the station, you know? And maybe it's June, maybe it's September, but at least, you know, we can have another discussion about it. And like many issues, it's a big enough issue, it should likely stand alone.
Because you're right, like we said before, you don't want to have it get buried in, you know how long it takes us sometimes to get through the budget. And you're gonna end up giving something seriously short shrift.
Right.
When you pile all that into like a regular meeting, you know? Or we end up continuing anyway to another day because we haven't had the time and we've just gotten through discussing, you know, adding electrical outlets to the fire station or something that, you know, bogs us down and, not that we need to add them, but, you know.
There's plenty of outlets.
Right. Well, I did want to take a moment to review those 4 options, because I don't think those options,
No, it was a
and
good idea.
we did not discuss those options, we just kind of skipped to option 4, so I just wanted to put those out there one more time,
That was prudent.
so people, we can have that discussion. And maybe, Bob, we do have, as Bob, the moderators here this evening, we have a special town meeting coming up Wednesday night, 7 o'clock at the elementary school, and maybe you can have a moment, you can just kind of hit on this as, it's out there, it's being discussed, and people should be kind of doing their homework, start doing their homework now. All right, Article 1, Mr.
Want to read the motion?
Yes, Clerk,
Got it.
please.
Draft, Margaret, or?
Either one,
Okay.
one of them has the comments.
Sure. Okay, so Article 1, these would be the motions now for the upcoming special town meeting, that's this Wednesday. Article 1, move that the town vote to transfer the care, custody, management, and control of the parcel of land shown on Assessor's Map 10 on page 3 and described in a deed recorded with the Franklin County Registry of Deeds in Book 1293, page 56, commonly referred to as the Public Safety Complex property, from the Board of Selectmen and/or such other board or officers having custody thereof for sewer, public safety, and such other purposes for which the parcel is currently held to the Board of Selectmen for such purposes and also for the purpose of leasing, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to lease for the installation of a solar energy facility or facilities, all or portions of such parcel for a term of years that will expire 20 years from the date of commencement of commercial operations of the facilities, and on such other terms and conditions, and for such consideration as the board deems appropriate, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to grant such access, utility, and other easements in, on, and under said parcel as may be necessary or convenient to construct, operate, and maintain such solar energy facility, and to further authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a power purchase and related agreements with the leasee of such property to purchase all or a portion of the electricity production of the solar facility for a term of years that will expire 20 years from the date of commencement of commercial operation of the facilities.
Could you go right into Article 2 also?
Yeah, Article 2 is very much the same framework, different parcel of property, but let's go right into Article 2. Move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to lease for the installation of a solar energy facility or facilities, all or portions of the parcels of land shown on Assessor's Map 6 as lots 30, 99, and 197, as described in deeds recorded with the Franklin County Registry of Deeds in Book 1524, page 205, Book 2115, page 152, and Book 2103, page 288, commonly referred to as the elementary school property, for a term of years that will expire 20 years from the date of the commencement of commercial operation of the facilities, and on such other terms and conditions, and for such consideration as the board deems appropriate, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to grant such access, utility, and other easements in, on, and under said parcels as may be necessary, or grant such access or convenient to construct, operate, and maintain such solar energy facility, and to further authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a power purchase and related agreements with the leasee of such property to purchase all or a portion of the electricity production of the solar facility for a term of years that will expire 20 years from the date of commencement of commercial operation of the facilities.
So if anybody's wondering out there, Margaret didn't have anything better to do for the last 3 months, and she wrote these two articles.
She had a lot of free time.
Can I just note that the only difference between the two, other than the parcel, of course, is that Article 1 references a changing of the use of the parcel, because the town had in the past authorized that use for solar, public safety, and highway. And now it just, that needs to be broadened. The other one was, this elementary school parcel is allowed to be used for municipal and agricultural purposes, so that's not, that language isn't necessary.
Which one is for agricultural purposes? The school or the?
The school is for municipal or agricultural purposes, so it does not require a change of use. Article 1 requires a change of use.
Why the difference in vote? One is a 2/3 and the other one is a majority.
Because of the change in use of the parcel, yeah.
That needs the 2/3, right?
Thank you.
That requires the 2/3.
It's a really thin, sorry, go ahead.
The Finance Committee voted 0-5 against.
Mhm.
What is their argument?
David can answer that.
Well, actually, I have the same question for them, which I'm gonna ask them on Wednesday. Because we haven't really got a lot of clarification about that, so I think we need to ask them about that.
Margaret, did you want to speak to that? 'Cause I know you've talked to,
I've talked to the chair of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee expressed two concerns. One, the length of term of the contract, and okay, two was, come on, I mentioned it a little earlier. Oh, boy.
how much money you're making.
The
No,
financials,
no,
was not the
I'll
financials.
think of it. I'm sorry,
That's all right.
I've lost it.
Well, the first thing we can address the length of the.
Oh,
length
wait
of
a
the
second, it might
contract.
even say it.
You want to tell?
What's that?
Oh, the rapidly changing,
Oh,
energy
technology,
industry and
yes.
advances in technology. There you go.
Okay, that's
When,
right.
when, on the first, why it's 20 years, David?
Basically, it's a kind of, I don't wanna say but it's the most common term for that allows everybody to essentially make out in the deal, really, and benefit. That's structured so that the people who build the excuse me, the
Facility?
facility, that's a better word for it, so that they can recoup their investment, we still make out in the deal as well. That's really the best way to structure it, I guess.
Basically, if you try to do it in 10 years,
Yeah, it's gonna
it'd
cost
be
too much
too
money.
expensive.
Right,
It would increase the cost tremendously.
exactly.
Although, a few years down the road, and this would be written into any contract, the town may have the option to buy out the assets, to actually buy the assets, and then continue to benefit, potentially,
Right.
by owning the facility, but that's just simply not the case in the first
Right, you
several
had to go
years.
to at least 4 to 5 years in before the assets depreciate enough that they'd wanna sell them. And then at that point, though, then if you were to do that, it's certainly something to think about. You just have to keep in mind that, okay, from that point on, we're 100% responsible for everything about it. Whereas with the lease arrangement, we don't really do anything.
Now, the wording in terms of that option to purchase.
Yep.
Is that wording sufficient to say that it's purely an option and not a requirement?
Yes.
At the end, yes, it's definitely an option.
I think one of the concerns that we've kind of heard is, one thing was like, this is a tough conversation, because 9-10 years ago, the schools were sitting here asking about putting on,
Additions.
because the school was gonna expand. And Bob, you were sitting here when
I remember that, yeah.
Bob, Ed Gately and Regina first broached that subject with the school committee, because they were running out of room.
Yep.
But the question was, well, what happens if the school, declining population, so we don't need the elementary school anymore, then we're gonna get stuck with that expense. And Scott I don't think, there's an understanding of net metering.
Right,
And if you
right.
could, Scott.
Yeah, what happens with the net metering itself, one of the questions that come up is if we run, the project is based on round numbers, 700 kilowatts. If the town does not have the need for those 700 kilowatts, what happens to any of that excess capacity?
This goes back into the grid.
It goes back in and it's bundled up and sold accordingly.
So we're not
really,
paying
we're
for
talking
it.
You
about
would be getting credit for that.
We would
If-
be getting,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
That's
we would
right.
be getting credits, but written into the contract, the town will ensure
Right.
that it has the ability to find off-takers,
Right.
another public entity,
Somebody to buy
to
it.
buy
that-
the excess generation.
Right.
So we would not, the town, actually, there would be a condition written into the contract that Broadway would work with the town to
Right.
find off-takers. And that would be a public entity, and they would buy the excess generation.
So the concern, the mechanism for clearing up any excess generation comes out of the contract, but the concern is, well, if you build it and you don't use it, is it a bad deal? And the hard and fast reality is there's still lease payments pilot accordingly, either or, pilot or lease, and
Or
the
both.
or both, and the generation is still in good working order, the power can still be sold.
And we just got an updated set of figures too, so that the annual benefit financially would be, it went from 15 and change up to 17 and change per year. And you're looking at 400,000, slightly over $400,000 a year financial benefit to the town.
Over term of the contract.
I'm sorry, yes,
Well,
over the 20-year period, right.
Right.
And that's based now on taking everything into account now when we're at probably the lowest point in terms of like gas prices. And as a matter of fact, there was a very good article on the radio tonight about how actually drilling has gone way down because basically they flooded the market, lowered the prices, and drove themselves out of business.
Right.
So,
And on top of that, Bob, one of the things with the, when it addresses technology and changes technology, it's to the Broadway, in this case, Broadway's advantage, if the PV technology changes significantly in the next 5 years, or even 10 years, where they could double, triple, quadruple their generation, it's to their benefit to replace what's there on site now, because it's already permitted, no one's gonna care, the contract isn't for a specific number of KW being produced. So it's their advantage to change the technology and to upgrade the technology, so that's gonna be the most modern, the most usable for them, because they're gonna wanna they're in business to make money.
Yeah. But they also have a contractual obligation to guarantee a percentage of the annual generation. So, yeah, it's to their benefit, but they also have to guarantee the town a
Right.
certain
And
percentage of it.
that's the one downside I can think of to us buying it, is that with a lease arrangement, like Tom was saying, it's to their benefit, you know, if suddenly it's, you know, they double the efficiency. Because right now, the best you can get in terms of efficiency out of panels is like 23 point something %. Say, call it 24%. So let's say, you know, 5 years down the road, somebody figures out a way to double the efficiency. If we had bought it, we'd have to go and buy all new equipment, you know, whereas obviously the owners would too, but it's to their benefit, and we wouldn't have to worry about that, you know. And at the end of the 20 years, I think we were discussing that there's not many projects out there that are that old yet, but there were a couple, and I think they were still producing up into the 80s, I believe. There is a certain percentage written in, and we've got the number somewhere that show they expect the efficiency to decrease a certain percentage every year as they get older.
0.5%.
Yeah. So you're still producing a lot of electricity at the end of your period, you know, so.
Now, on the school property, where is the access to that going to be? Is that going to be off 116, or is that going to be through school property?
That'd be through the school property, you can't access it,
Yeah.
you have to cross that spot.
Right.
Across that ditch?
Yeah,
Right,
it makes no sense.
Go down the road and off to the right.
That and apply for a curb cut and, so.
Yeah.
So again, I would suggest that there's no layout, with the exception of the primary power lines that exist currently, that show any crossing onto 116 from that parcel, or from this infrastructure.
And honestly,
direct-
they don't.
No, sorry.
Well, once it's in too, there's really not much, you know, a truck
Yeah.
drives in and they do their inspection and whatnot, and they go up pretty quickly.
Yeah. The inverter, the power would be connected directly to the express circuit. They would interconnect right to 116. So that would be a direct connection from the parcel.
That'd be underground line right to it. so-
Probably an underground line, I don't know exactly, yeah.
But effectively, these are lease and allowed to lease and allowed to enter into PPA. That's all that these
Permission.
articles, that's all these
Exactly.
articles are asking for.
All of this to give permission. It's a long,
That's okay, it's still, and it's a transparent process. I think people bear, you know, I think the trap, if I could, Mr. Chair, the trap is, you know, you pass these two things and tomorrow morning, you know, a truck shows up with panels. That's
Yeah, I
that's
know.
not the case. There's not even,
Far
far from it. There's not even a framework for a contract, let alone a real contract, let
And-
alone all the delineation, let alone all the engineering, let alone.
Exactly. Even if the
Interconnection.
contract was signed
Interconnection
now.
agreement, et cetera.
Right.
Going before the
Conservation Commission.
Conservation,
I was just gonna
planning
say,
board
right.
process,
Exactly right.
zoning bylaw, yeah.
So there's a lot left to it.
No,
So I would hope that after the finance committee, I think they have questions, I would hope they would reconsider their vote. Cause I don't remember the 4 or 5 members of the finance committee coming to our meeting to address these questions, so.
And also ask questions again if they have questions.
So hopefully when their questions will be answered.
I'm hoping that there'll be a town meeting handout, a frequently asked question sheet. The board has it to look at, review tonight. It would be just, you know, what is the project? What is net metering? So hopefully it'd be in simple terms for people to be able to take a look at and understand what the project is.
And Beth will be there, right? So, or the consultant will be there too, so you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who
So
knows
we'll
more
have-
about it than her.
We'll ask that you allow her to speak. She's our consultant that worked with Margaret and us on this plan in the Energy Committee.
now, if I remember right, the selection of the company that's going to install and run this, that was a selection process where you requested proposals, correct?
Yes.
Correct. And if you want, David was our rep on that, so if there are any questions about that process, if you want, David can probably spend a little time. If you want, you can ask him to explain that process. He was well versed in that, and
I also have the old binders if you want them.
Oh,
Stacked
boy.
like this. I was actually just asking Margaret, like, what can I do to get rid of these?
Do I have to leave?
But yeah, we went through, we had 4 meetings and 2 public forums. And one of those meetings was interviews with all the potential companies. And we all sat down and went through all the
Tom was there
proposals
for
and
that.
whittled down through it. That's right, yes, yeah.
That was a great night.
So it was a long, arduous process, and it was also very good, because you learned a lot of stuff. I mean, none of us went into this, with the exception of Beth, you know, as anything remotely approaching solar experts, you know. So it was an enlightening process, no pun intended there, you know.
And
But-
there were representatives on the evaluation team from the Board of Selectmen, David.
Yep,
Teresa
Energy.
Jones from the Planning Board, Mike Zioli from the Energy Committee, Bruce Bennett from the Finance Committee,
Yep.
and Bob Lesko, the Facilities Director at the school.
And one other thing that's not mentioned here is on the school property, the school committee took a vote on that also.
Yes, at their last meeting. And also, too, we have factored in the current energy savings that we've done to date into the whole picture of what we're trying to estimate in terms of usage and everything. Because after a certain point, I don't know that, because one of the questions I saw out there somewhere was, what happens if we save a huge chunk of electricity?
Yep.
Good question, but in reality, at the moment, there aren't a lot of ways to save assuming the same usage. I don't think there are, with the technologies that are out there, there's not gonna be any giant leaps in savings in the
But it doesn't
foreseeable
matter.
future.
It's net
And
metering.
even if there is,
Well, right, but
It doesn't matter,
it
because
doesn't
it's
matter
part
in
of
that
net
respect.
metering, it doesn't matter.
Right.
we would have the provision in the contract regardless, well, whether it's, you know, whether it's not using a building anymore or reducing a significant amount
Right,
of.
we're covered in that, but like, I'm just trying to illustrate if we weren't. Do you know what I mean? In reality, there really isn't an opportunity to save a massive chunk of electricity, you know? I mean, there's definitely savings
Maybe
that
not
can be
short
made.
term.
That's right, you've got to
But
look, I
over
think,
over a period of
it's
years.
a long, yeah, probably over the term of the lease, in like, you know.
Any other questions, Mr. Moderator? Mr. Bergeron, any questions?
No, if I could, just one statement, you know, this boils down to 2 things, a land lease and where we buy our power.
Pretty much,
That's all this boils down to.
Or where we buy our generation, right?
well, yeah,
Yeah, or
generation, right,
generation.
exactly, yeah, as opposed to supply.
I saw Margaret and Aaron had exchanged emails about how many gallons of fuel that you're saving and.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's in our little handout too. And actually, there was another, I have another statistic too, because in addition to, while Margaret's looking that up.
Oh, here it is.
Let's see.
675,000 kilowatt hours a year solar generation would reduce corresponding greenhouse gas by 677,700 pounds of carbon dioxide annually. According to the EPA, this is equivalent to annual greenhouse gas emissions from 64 passenger vehicles, carbon dioxide emissions from 34,462 gallons of gasoline consumed, carbon dioxide emissions from 715 barrels of oil consumed, carbon dioxide emissions from the electricity use of 46 homes for 1 year, and carbon sequestered annually by 252 acres of pine or fir forests, or greenhouse gas emissions avoided by recycling 115 tons of waste instead of landfilling it. Those are calculated right on the EPA's website.
Right, those are environmental benefits, and then I was wondering too, what about, because we talk about job creation, jobs in America, what about jobs? Because you gotta think that this is gonna have some effect on that, and I did a little digging around, and it says here, solar energy can be a significant source of job creation. A recent study estimates that 20 manufacturing job years and 13 installation job years are created for each megawatt of power of solar panels installed, and the majority of the jobs created are white-collar or highly skilled craft labor, including engineers, assemblers, sales reps, and installers. And in addition, a large number of indirect jobs are created in supporting industries such as the production of the raw materials like the silica and the aluminum for the brackets or whatever. And it says stats show that for every job created by the PV industry, between 1.8 and 2.8 jobs are created in other segments of the economy. So there's a whole other, I think, section that actually kind of has not really been mentioned a whole lot. Was the job creation.
Yep.
And this is kind of where, jobs get created is by all of us doing stuff like this.
I guess I would say if you ask about the benefit, financial benefit, how's that land been used for the last 20 years and how much money has been generated off that for the last 20 years? The both lots, and I can tell you 0. So I don't know. Plus, I don't know many uses that you can have for that land that are gonna pay you for it, and you're gonna basically have that in 20 years. Well, you're gaining something over the 20 years, plus when it's done, it's still yours.
Good point.
And we don't have to run it, we don't have to manage it, we don't have to do all that other stuff, so. Okay, so Article 1, motion,
Move to recommend Article 1 as it's written.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Margaret, 3-0. Article 2,
Motion?
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Margaret, 3-0. Article 3,
Move that the town vote to transfer from stabilization the sum of $7,500 for legal and consulting services associated with the solar installation described in Article 1 and 2.
any other discussion?
It's
And-
pretty practical.
I mean, we know we gotta do it, so.
It's in the best interest of the town, and it's actually to have any of that stuff where we have consultant services. And look at what's transpired with the consultant we have spent time on, and energy and resources.
Any questions?
No. Motion to recommend Article 3.
Second.
A motion made, seconded, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Margaret, 3-0. Article 4,
Move that the town transfer from stabilization the sum of $1,958 to line 1235110 town administrator's salary for fiscal year 2013. Mr. Chair, if I could.
Go ahead.
I was the appointee of the board to negotiate contract with the town administrator, and this sum, our contract conclusion, of course, was post annual town meeting, and that allowed for Margaret to accept our offer to, well, essentially get her 2009 wages back. To do that is costing the town $1,958 to go back a mere, 3 budget cycles.
Okay, any questions? Okay, motion?
Move to recommend Article 3.
Second.
Motion made and seconded on Article 4. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0, Margaret. Article 5.
Move the town vote to transfer from capital stabilization the sum of $28,421.13 for the Hadley Road culvert reconstruction, including all costs incidental and related thereto, and further to rescind the vote taken under Article 31 at the April 27, 2012 annual town meeting, authorizing the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to borrow $140,000 for reconstruction of said Hadley Road culvert.
All right. Questions?
It's done.
Pretty much.
Thanks to a lot of,
Stabilization?
We've been
just enough,
we've been trying
just enough.
like
Gotta
hell
be
for a couple of years.
Yeah.
There's a little over $39,000 in the capital stabilization fund.
Second?
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Article 6.
Move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the general court for special legislation to allow Richard E. Dickinson, a town of Sunderland call firefighter, notwithstanding the provision of any general or special law to the contrary, to serve in such position until the age of 70, or until the date of his retirement or non-reappointment, whichever occurs first. Provided, however, that no deductions from the regular compensation of Richard E. Dickinson shall be made under Chapter 32 of the general laws subsequent to his reaching the age of 65 in connection with his service to the town for retirement or pension purposes. Provided, however, that the general court may make clerical and editorial changes of form only to the bill unless the Board of Selectmen approves amendments to the bill prior to enactment by the general court, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to approve such amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of the petition.
Specifically, an individual's name is mentioned in here, and that is due to the requirements of the Council of the House of Representatives. So it
And
wasn't something that we wanted to do, but we were obligated for the special legislation to be filed to include a name.
it could have been a group of names in one, but in this particular case, only
Right.
he falls into this category at this point. Just for the board's information, you might have seen that on January 8th, counsel for the House put together the language for the bill that would be submitted. So they're ready to receive it from the town if it's voted.
All right, any,
So basically, it's allowing him to continue in doing what he's doing, except that when he gets to 65 and above, there are no longer any deductions for his retirement. Okay.
And essentially a cap of 70
right.
or non-reappointment.
There's a mandatory retirement age for firefighters, uniformed firefighters and police officers in Chapter 32. So it allows them to continue on.
So that's what 32 is?
Chapter 32, yeah. It deals with pensions primarily.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
okay, you have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's it. So, special town meeting, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, Sunderland Elementary School. We hope that you come out. And again, it's, Bob has promised it'll be a quick one. Right, Mr. Moderator?
Have no control over that.
So, we hope people will be able to show up for that. All right, I think we're almost done, aren't you, Mr. Bergeron?
I think that's
Did the
it.
board have any questions on the fact sheet that's proposed to be used as the town meeting handout? All
so.
set? You've got that in your packets, it's just a FAQ.
Did you wanna see this, Bob?
The handout, draft
That,
handout?
that would be the
Yeah, you can
handout.
keep that if you want. Should be good reading with your coffee in the morning.
Anything else, Scott?
No, not at this point.
Mr. Pierce?
Nope, I think
You all
we're
set?
good right now.
Mr. Tom?
I've got a question. A couple weeks ago, you made mention something about the parcel of property on 47, the Brown and Regan Tobacco Farm.
APR, yeah.
Is anything moving on that?
They, there was, because of the bylaw change we had, last year? They,
2011.
2011, they had to, alter, their part, what they're doing with the, APR money is that they're cutting out two building lots.
Right.
So they're gonna be putting 2 building lots in there, but the rest of it's gonna go into the APR. It's all set with the state. It's
It is.
basically, it's just basically the dotting the i's, crossing the t type of thing right now, so,
Well,
hopefully.
yeah. As far as the town's contribution, as it looks right now, the town's contribution will be able to be fully covered by federal scenic byway funds.
And that also includes the Hadley portion too.
That and the
It's not
Hadley
just-
portion.
Cause that straddles both towns, so that whole section is.
It would be a
Go on.
contiguous APR, yeah.
And one thing, I mean, we do thank the town of Hadley, meeting. I
Yes.
think that meeting where we had the 2 boards,
Yep.
was a,
That
Very
was
good
a good,
meeting.
it was a kind of a kick in the pants for the project, so. Sometimes things like that matter, so we're just fortunate that they took an interest in the project also, and we'll be talking to them about that.
Thank you.
Okay. Upcoming dates, concerns? Meeting on Wednesday, no meeting this coming 21st because of the the
Holiday, yeah.
okay.
Martin Luther King Day.
It's gonna, I should just give the board just a brief, very brief update that we were notified, on the Sugar Bush project. It's on the website, it's on this, the SJC's website, that, the, decision has, that they've made a decision against the town's appeal, so, we don't have all the details on it yet. People can certainly look on the SJC's website, for details on the decision.
Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Margaret, 3-0, declare us out at 8:02, please.
Is that right?